Welcome to the Awesome Black Dad Show, where our goal is to give life to the stories of fathers in a way that empowers and encourages dads to become a better version of themselves. This episode kicks off conversations about business and entrepreneurship. And as fathers, we're always told a man should provide and protect, but all too often those conversations stop there. The goal this month is simple: encourage fathers to not just have conversations about business, but to be more deliberate in our pursuit of executing on our passions and building businesses that will outlast us. Today we talked to Michael Drayton Sr., a husband, father, and businessman. Mike was born and raised in Chicago, where at an early age, he realized he had a unique set of gifts. His gift for composing music has allowed him to work with the likes of Spike Lee, while his knack for numbers has made him a successful day trader and entrepreneur. Michael and I discuss everything from his losses as a child to his most recent entrepreneurial endeavor as the principal owner of the only African-American title company in the state of Illinois. I introduce to you Mike Drayton. Can you tell me who is Mike Drayton?
Husband, father. Those are the titles.
Those are the titles.
But I would say, man, somebody that is committed to the betterment of my people and humanity at large. And to that degree, whatever tools or academics, resources that I have, I utilize those in order to empower people. That's it in a nutshell.
Right, and that's absolutely what it's about, empowering us to be a bit better version of ourselves. So this show is about fathers primarily, but also we're getting into more content about inspiring fathers to do things and go beyond the things that they've seen, right? And so before we get into that, what was your upbringing like? Did you grow up in a house with your father, or someone like that presented themselves as a father figure?
Right. So two things. I grew up with a stepfather.
Okay.
But I was primarily raised by my grandfather.
Okay.
And to this day, I do not know my biological father, which governs, that's the passion that drives me around making sure that kids know who their fathers are. So my wife has said, do you want to pursue finding them? I'm like, if it's not inconvenient to my current lifestyle, perhaps.
Okay.
And so I did have a stepfather in the household.
Well, define inconvenient.
Because I think philosophically, the question always is, would I have been better off had I had my biological father there? That's the depressing question. As you get older and become philosophical, you're stating, perhaps I'm exactly where I need to be based upon the given circumstances. And so philosophically, that's just kind of where I lie. What I mean by inconvenience is if he were to show up in perhaps a coding or a way that doesn't suit or fit into where I'm currently at in life, I would look at it as it's more obstructive than conducive. So if it's conducive and it slides in, yes, because unfortunately I'm at the age where convenience is everything. I'm stating that without having that circumstance presented. So if it's presented, then perhaps I take another look at it. But at this point, I know how to get into contact with them. I have relatives that's been in contact with them, so on and so forth.
Right. So grandfather, I kind of interrupted that story.
So my grandfather raised me. Essentially, my grandparents raised me. My mom also, but she had her own issues. But my grandfather got murdered when I was 15.
Okay.
So that really threw me way off. Trauma, we talked about that.
We'll get into that in a second.
Right. So that really threw me off. And so the challenge is, at that age, being rather impressionable, you're not certain as to even needing male guidance. You seek male guidance, but you don't see the necessity for it. And so what happened was, because I was, the quote unquote super smart kid, I, found refuge in books, found refuge in music, the arts, particularly math, sciences. found refuge in that. And by the time I got to business, there was these male figures that kind of showed up and sort of guided and steered me through. Mm-hmm. So still the idea of having a father figure. I had my mother remarried, had a stepfather. He was a good dude. Mm-hmm. But I didn't see the necessity for it. Okay. Because at this point, I'm already moving in my life and I'm focusing on business. Mm-hmm. Perhaps as a crutch to not deal with the pain of not having a father. Okay. And then I think later on I did discover that perhaps it was somewhat of a crutch. Okay. To not really deal with the pain of I don't have a father. Mm-hmm. Especially when you get in a situation where somebody has their father in the household. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I don't have my father in the household. Okay. And so I did a lot of reason why I was able to talk about that traumatizing scenario is because I had to do a lot of soul searching. Yeah. To sort of figure out shit. That's why now my life is based upon these series of discovery and figuring out things. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, my grandfather, though, instilled a lot in me, about how to be a gentleman, tie your shoes. Used to always tell me, make sure your shoes are tied and make sure you have a good timepiece on. Mm-hmm. So I've always had nice watch, nice shoes. Fortunately, now you people have phones.
So now you got a nice phone.
Yeah, so my grandfather exposed me to a lot. He's involved in local politics. So when he passed, it was really about a year after he passed, my grandmother bought me a piano. Okay. And this was 15, so about 16, 17. Yeah, so
that's when you get into music.
Into music really heavily. Figured out I had some facility for music. Didn't know that I really had, but hey, I had it.
So you're a self-taught musician?
Initially, interesting, I started music lessons when I was about 3 because I have my ears are, some say perfect, I don't know about that, but about 3, and then I didn't want to play piano. My thoughts were on Saturday, I wanted to be outside playing. We used to have a huge backyard. I wanted to play in the dirt, make mud pies. I don't want to do no music. I want to do some other stuff, play basketball, sports, whatever. So I didn't do anything until about 8th grade. I started tinkering, but right at about 17. But the interesting thing is, when I discovered I was good at music, I noticed that I became very attractive to a lot of girls. So obviously that sort of inspired me to stay in music for a longer period of time. But so that was kind of, I think it was a crutch musically to kind of have some way to sort out the absence of, stepfather died at that particular time. And my mother eventually did remarry, but the stepfather passed from a heart attack, and then my grandfather got murdered, and then my second stepfather died from an asthma attack. Lungs collapsed.
So you were around a lot. What time frame is that? From 15 to what?
That was 15 to about, I would say right around about 22.
Oh, that's a lot of trauma in a short period of time.
And my sister overdosed also during that time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you're saying that music was effectively your cave, right? To
music and books.
Music and books is where you went for your solitude.
Physics and a lot of physics, a lot of science books. Okay. Which is why I started talking about Galileo Galilei.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's really that's. And again, I look at my story as being something that is very unique. It's just me going through whatever. But
I mean, that is relatively unique, though, because there are not many people in general that go through that much loss in that period of time. And so, you know what I mean? Especially from a father figure, right? For a young boy that's on the cusp of becoming a man.
Forming.
Yeah. And so you're losing every man that steps into your life
is gone.
Is leaving some kind of way. And I don't know, when I was 15, there was a lot of stuff that I couldn't correlate. My mind wasn't formed as a man yet. So I imagine that some of that you could have been blaming on yourself to some degree, right? And not really figuring out like where you fit, and every time somebody comes into your life, they
interesting. I didn't even have the intellectual fortitude to make that adjustment that it was my fault. Because the way my brain was working, I wasn't involved in the blame side of the equation because I didn't realize the necessity. See, one of the things Blame comes in when you realize the necessity that somebody didn't provide for you, that you didn't necessarily have any control over.
Okay.
And so there were guys at church that I looked up to, but then again, I was transitioning. So there was always old cats around that would kind of share things with me. Hey, young man, keep your head up, do this and that. So there was always a community of men around to consistently encourage you to do the right thing.
Right.
So now somebody personally being active in my life, no. My grandmother eventually did remarry, and the guy that she married had a influence in my life. I'll say that. That was my other grandfather. And so he taught me, we called him Fred Sanford, because he collected, we literally had, he collected everything but the kitchen sink. He collected the kitchen sink.
Right.
So he had a huge influence in a lot of ways, not necessarily intellectually, because he only had a third grade education. But I always understood money, but this guy was a miser among misers. I mean, he would take a brown paper bag and go to Salvation Army and do his shopping on the day where you can fill up your bag for $1. And he had extraordinary wealth, literally finance in the bank, because he figured it out.
Right.
You know what I mean? And basically did cold calls all day, calling attorneys, doctors, whoever.
Okay.
Built relationships. Made some money, ended up getting out of that business, went back to the business, ended up working for a boiler room, which is quote unquote the Wolf of Wall Street stuff. A boiler room pushes very high risk, penny stock, pink sheet stuff. I did that, did very well at that also. Took the money out, started a record company.
Okay. Oh. We'll get to the record company in a second. I did want to actually mention the fact that at a very young age you realized you had two gifts. Where did that realization come from? Did somebody push you towards that, or you kind of came to that?
So how I figured it out is there's two kinds of you have musicians that play by ear, you have musicians that read music, and you have musicians that can do both. I'm the guy that can do both, so I thought everybody can do both. If anybody's a musician in here, you either learned how to read music, and if you don't have music to read, it's hard for you to listen and play music. Okay. If you play by ear, it's a lot harder for you to look at a sheet music and learn how to read. I can do both. Right. So I was told that was something that was unique. And particularly in the black church, I was told it was something that was unique. I didn't think it was nothing special, you know. And so the true story, who solidified that it was unique, was Spike Lee. So this just recently happened, because I'm just doing my shit. So, and then Spike said, he says, I'd never seen somebody that can. And so how did the interaction with Spike come about? Like, how did you and Spike wind up interacting or meeting? So So you got to keep in mind, this is a few years ago. So we've missed a whole decades. Yeah, sure. We'll get back. I'll jump. Yeah, but we were at, Spike came to visit at St. Sabina, where I'm under contract there. So I put in some time there running the music department. And Spike came to a rehearsal. We was preparing for something. I think it was Easter. Spike walks in, and he interrupts the rehearsal, and I asked him to leave. And John Cusack was with him also, which is how I met Parrish Lewis. So it was hilarious. So Spike ends up. I didn't see him afterwards. Spike gives me a call after. Had his people call me, and then I told the people, have him call me directly. I don't deal with secretaries or secondhand people. Put the decision maker on the phone. He thought that was funny. I was like, it's not funny. Don't have your secretary call me. But anyway, man, he said, I want you to do some music for the film.
And that film being Chirac.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said, okay, cool. And so he gave me the guidelines, and then within 24 hours, gave me 2 weeks, but within 24 hours, I got back to him everything he needed. But he said to me, he said he was skeptical. He said, so did you do all of it? He kept asking me, did you do all of this? I was like, yeah, man. He said, you wrote out of this? Yeah. Like, so this is your stuff, you own this? Yes. And he says, normally it takes somebody in our industry at least about 2 weeks to come up with concepts and ideas, and you just did that by yourself. I was like, yeah, now pay me.
Yeah, send my money.
And so that I did one. Then he kept going. He said, can you do this? Yeah, I kept doing it.
Oh, so you've done more since Chirac?
Oh, yeah. Well, no, that's still Chirac.
As a part of Chirac.
He's asked me for more after that. But he said to me that's a very unique gift and skill that you have. And in fact, he told me, he says, I know you're involved in some other stuff. He says, you really need to leave Chicago. He says, so if it's something that you want to do and pursue it, I said, it's tough to say it's a passion.
Right.
Because it's more therapy. So why would I want to take something that's therapeutic and turn it into a full-blown professional?
Yeah, but what?
So I'm always between that.
Yeah, I wonder, it's interesting that you say that, because when you talk to most people about their gifts, most people run from their gifts. And so, and I don't, in some instances, it's literal run. They will not do the thing that they are absolutely better than the top person doing it at this point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you say, and it's effortless. Like, somebody asks you to compose something, you're like, all right, man, give me 15 minutes. Here you go. And they're like, wait a minute, dude.
Right.
You just and so I don't know, like, what do you think that is? Like, why? I understand that it's therapeutic for you, and you're like, you don't want to tarnish that, because then if it becomes something for money, then it, you kind of feel obligated. But it's the thing that most would argue you were put on this planet to do.
Right.
So why do you think you...
I do it. I don't think that I do it as much as people think that I should.
Yeah, right.
I do it as much as I want to do it.
Okay.
And so, like I just did, I've done maybe 7 museum installations around the world. With compositions, been paid very well for it. So, but then by the same token, I can trade the market and make 50 grand within a couple of minutes. Right. And I'm just as excited.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you got 2 gifts to choose from, you can do that type of stuff.
Let me propose this, though, very humbly.
Yeah.
I don't see them as separate. I see them as a
Sure. But do you understand that the reality is that there aren't many people...
The end user is different. The end user is different of the services, but for me, it's coming out of the same kind of experience. So I get guys that are telling me, man, you need to dump all of that finance stuff, just do music. Yeah. And then there's a whole group of people that have no idea that I have the music side. Right.
I mean, it's kind of, so when you think about the idea of jack of all trades, right? So jack of all trades, master of none, right? So you can be very good at a ton of different things, but to be great, most people have to hone in. Like, if you think about the Kobe Bryants, the Michael Jordans, the Reginald Lewises, they hone in on those things, and they're absolutely 100% great, right?
So I have been compared to, I took a test to kind of see very successful, we call them polymaths or polyhistors. Very successful polymaths or polyhistors. Steve Jobs came up, Bill Gates came up. Sort of the same kind of brain moving through this sequence of stuff. So people ask me, they say, so I don't see myself as being a jack of all trade. Again, because it's the end user. I see it as one organism with many facets. So it's one body with different functions.
I mean, you figured the perfect scenario for how to group your gifts in a way where it's not overwhelming.
And that's the thing, because I said one day to my wife, you have to figure out a balance. And what I found is, because of people that I know on the entertainment side, so I guess the latest thing, I didn't see the R. Kelly thing.
Right.
But, I know R. Kelly. We don't have a relationship with nothing like that. But I've seen things. He is not an anomaly in the industry. So no matter how much they want to make him out to be the animal that was portrayed, there's other people worse than that in the creative business that I decided I don't want to have nothing to do with that as a matter of integrity. I can't be bothered with that, you know. And so I decided, for me, I do the thing at the church, and if some other opportunities come, I'll take advantage. But I can be at home doing my thing. You know? I just got a contract from NBA. The United Masters is the company. I got a call saying, "Can you do something for the NBA for next month?" And I was like, "If I get some time, I'll do it," or whatever. And the girl on the phone was like,
"This is the NBA.
Like, are you serious?" And I was like, "I'm fucking busy. I mean, I don't, So I did it. They asked for the demo. And he sent me a nice size check for the demo, and so my wife is just looking like, she always looking like, I don't know what you want.
Right.
But anyway, the point is that, man, the beauty is that I have the luxury of either accepting it or declining it.
Yeah.
And that's because of some decisions that I made that may not be favorable to some people. Right. But it makes sense based upon how I process things. And I built businesses and sold businesses using it's just
the same kind of the same kind of thinking and process.
Yeah, intuitiveness. Right. What you're saying, it's the same exact thing. Right. When I was in boardrooms, music gives you this capacity for problem solving. But being a trader does that. Yeah. You have to be able to make decisions and live with them. You have to understand numbers very well, how to read numbers. Right. Why does this make sense versus why does that make sense? Okay. And so I think out of those experiences comes this broad philosophical thrust about how I perceive and see things. Right. And the beauty is all of these experiences have I'm able to share a lot of information, wisdom, because I've been in these rooms and have seen a lot from both sides. And we're going to get into that just in a little bit. I kind of got us off a little bit, but we're going to get back. It still was definitely relevant. So in terms of, just to go back to a little bit about fatherhood and how that's impacted you, you now have you're a father of how many? Today? 2 boys, and I raised my daughter since the age of 4, stepdaughter. Okay, and so the idea of what it means to be a father, you talked about the trauma that you went through. Where did that come from? Like, what made you want to be a dad? So, if we're going to be candid, true, right? Yeah, we're going to be candid. Let's be candid. I had no desire to be a father. Because I loved being single on Dearborn. So I was cool. Okay. I had a few cars. Living a single life, huh? Man, went traveled the world, got my MBA around, just doing my thing. And so money and music. And then my wife, who was my friend at the time, we were cool. We used to hang out. So my wife used to run one of the companies that I built. She literally ran the company while she was running an architect firm. And we were just friends. Then she had my son. And then I was like, I'm not going to be out of my son's life. Now you see that? So it changed. Yeah, so it changed your idea. So the emphasis was, I'm not going to be out of my son's life. So she was like, let's work out a scenario where you can visit. I was living downtown, and I told her, I'm not visiting my son. So I moved from downtown, and she had an apartment that I helped her get. And I just moved all my shit in the apartment. She came home like, you moved in. Yeah, like I'm not. So And so then what I did was I said, okay, I had to figure out the strategy. I'll marry her because she has my son. Because unfortunately for me, the way my brain works, love is not a criteria alone for marriage.
Okay.
Right? And so I'm not under any illusion that mushy, whatever that crap is, I figure I had that with my first love, because you lose your innocence only once. I'm like, so the second time around, I'm going to feel, I love you, but that innocence of being stupid in love, that phase is gone.
Sure.
So at this point of engagement, I was just, so I bought her a nice ring to piss all of her girlfriends off. I did. And when you see her, you can see a ring. It took me about a year to find the right stone. Worked with a broker, did the whole nine, got the ring, proposed to her right down here at Laurie's, the whole thing, on the knees or whatever.
Oh, so you did do the romantic thing, though.
Yeah, but I did the romantic thing for her. And so what I've learned is, since I've been married, there are very few marriage problems, but there's a whole lot of singleness problems that show up in the context of marriage.
Okay.
And what that means is a marriage problem can only happen as a result of there being two people, period. Meaning that how you decide on where your kid goes to school, that's a marriage problem. Your wife not getting enough attention, that's the daddy problem that she didn't get when she was a kid. It has nothing to do with you. How she feels about herself has nothing to do necessarily with you when she enters into marriage.
Right.
Now, how you either foster that's a different conversation to have. But that's kind of how I looked at it. So when we were having problems, it was really more about two people trying to figure out how to live together.
Right.
But if there was an esteem issue, I had nothing to do with your low self-esteem. You was that way before you got to me.
Right.
It just.
But it's that problem then does in some ways become your problem, though, right? If you want to make it work.
If it becomes your problem if you want to make it work, but the question is, if you haven't been groomed properly on even how to handle that, then you will say, I'm going to leave, which is what I did.
Okay.
I wrote a letter and said, I'm out. Gone. Don't want to be bothered. But I decided I'm going to stay because I said fundamentally she's a good girl. And so we'll stick this one out. Okay. But we had those points of like, I don't want to deal with your esteem. And then I had issues. She told me, you're talking down to me like I'm a kid, like you my father, you have to stop that. And I said, see, because one of the first things that happens when a relationship is heading downhill is the word contempt. When you begin to have contempt, if you don't reconcile when that first comes up, it's downhill. And so anyway, that's kind of the story of my fatherhood. So I raised my son, was with my son 24 hours a day. I took care of her daughter, made sure she had everything she needed. Then my second son came along. My wife was pissed, like, I'm pregnant again. And it's like, yeah, we had sex, unprotected. That's pretty much what happens. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. That's kind of how that went. And so I decided I wanted to be present in my son's life. And I still am. We argue and get into it or whatever, but we're in it together. Yeah. From walking in their rooms, butting in on all of that, especially my 16-year-old. We in it. Yeah. And so that's fatherhood. One of the things that I started doing the photo shoot was because there's this special bond that I had as a father with my kids. And it's like there's got to be a group of guys that have the same thing. Or if not, let's promote this kind of thing. Right.
And so what's the impetus behind the photo shoot?
The impetus is because
And what is the photo shoot?
It was just a space of seeming like, I don't want to sound misogynistic, but there's an antonym for the word misogynistic. I forgot what it is. So it's a word that it's the opposite of misogynistic, which is sort of quote unquote the hatred of women. It was this move that I thought was this hatred towards men, a black man. It's always the complaining about, there's no emphasis about the guys that are trying to at least do it right. and getting stepped on. I found myself supporting guys that were trying to get custody of their children. Like, what the fuck is that about?
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't you want the other parent in the kid's life when the kid carries the other parent's DNA?
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't know how to deal with that kid's, the piece of them that's their father if he's not there. It's crazy, right? Mm-hmm. So that was just kind of philosophically, man. I wanted to be there. And the photo shoot was a way to really show the best light of us. Seeing fathers walking their kids to school, that's common, but you don't see that often.
Mm-hmm. Not in images by that. No. we might see it in our communities.
But we don't see the images of it, man. We don't see the fathers taking care of their kids, out playing with their kids. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the best of who we are. Mm-hmm. So I will always default to that. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's saying deadbeat, first of all, I used to tease and say deadbeats don't apply to black fathers. That was my generalization, obviously. But my point was that's the other people. That's not who we are. Mm-hmm. We're just not getting probably the press.
Right.
And definitely there's nothing like that, no images like that in commercials. But that's kind of why I wanted to start and say, let's control our content, our image, and then let's create let's create a coffee table book, do some billboards, and just kind of say, hey, man, this is the best of who we are, and it's not the worst of who we are. And I don't care if females or kids or people are angry at their father. He's still a significant piece, and we can't be dismissive of that.
Okay. So that's a good transition. I want to get into your business acumen and some of those principles around how you do business and why it's important for us to have our own businesses. So you spoke in a number of different places about businesses. So your idea of a thing that stuck out to me was your concept of ownership versus control.
Yes.
Right. And so typically what we think when we hear ownership, we assume that you own, you control. Your theory is a little different. So can you get it from the perspective of business and probably life in general? What is your theory on ownership and control?
So the best example that I can give, and I think I just gave one. It's a trust. Okay, so if you think about a glass, and you think about, let's say, this is liquor, and this is a glass. You own the liquor, but when you pour the liquor in the glass, you have more control. And so the difference is what you control. What I've learned in my dealing with very high net worth people is they move their assets away from their bodies, quote unquote, body, organization, organism, corpus. I'm using that as an analogy.
Okay.
The word corporation comes from the Latin corpus, body.
Okay.
So when you own a company, you have all the liability of the company falls on you, no matter what. If you take the company and separate yourself from the company in a trust, you can control it without directly owning it.
Sure. Okay.
Right?
Gotcha.
So that's the same thing that exists with assets. Somebody sets up a trust for their kids. I can control the assets, but my children own the assets because they're in a trust. That's why we have a trustee. The trustee is responsible for overseeing those assets. They're responsible for overseeing the assets. I'm not, but I control the trust. Another example is there's a gun shop out in Riverdale. And the church that I went to, the pastor used to go out there and protest him all the time. The pastor says, I cannot find out any information on him and where he lives. And I laughed. I said, yeah, because it's probably all in a trust. So he owns the business, but the trust controls the business.
So as far as he goes is in terms of researching who owns it, he stops at a point and you can't get past.
Can't find out who owns it. Because most people that have an enormous amount of wealth, an enormous amount of liability, they have to separate the business out and put it in a trust, which is your protection. That's the difference. Entrepreneurship. You can own a business and control a business. Ideally, what I mean when I say how do you control something is you are still making the decisions, although you're not doing the day-to-day in there. Okay.
Give us an example of where a business would think that they own and control, but the reality is that you really just own. There's somebody else that can come in and has more control than you.
Because the city has control of your real estate.
Okay.
Right?
So that's a perfect example.
So they levy property taxes. Guess what happens if you don't pay the taxes for 2 years?
They come and get it.
Tax certificate goes up for sale for 2 years. You get to have a bid on it. We call that tax lien sale or the tax sale. So in that instance, you only own that. You don't control that. At the end of the day, because you are sitting, the property is literally sitting on a body that is controlled by the municipality. Unless you control the rights above the ground and below. Most of the time, you won't control the rights below the ground under the surface of the basement because the city has pipes and things running through there that control the water flow in the city. Okay? You can't go any higher necessarily and build up because it's the air rights are controlled on the top side, you see. So then another example would be if I own a property. Public, eminent domain.
Okay.
Eminent domain comes in and says the higher and better use for this property is a new road. They'll come and say, either we offer you fair market value or you take us to court. We're going to seize it anyway. So that's a very good example of how things are controlled versus owner. That's an analogy.
Sure.
That's not practically that doesn't happen as often. But that's the situation. The bank, there's a concept called hypothecation. So where Robert Kiyosaki and I disagree is he said that a house is a liability. That is not technically true.
Okay.
The house is not debt. The house exists aside from the debt note that is attached to it. That's why you go to the closing to attach the debt to the house, which the house then becomes collateralized for the mortgage that you just took out, right? That concept is called hypothecation. When you hypothecate and attach the note to the house, the bank now has control over the house as their collateral. Right?
Which
is why the banks require you to have insurance because they need you to have insurance to insure against their loss.
Right.
This is why when you miss a payment, foreclosure is the acceleration of the debt. So they can come and grab the collateral back to put it on the market to recover. So that's the difference between control. If you want to control the real estate, then you should control the banks. Okay? If you want to control assets in your neighborhood, then you have to figure out how do you get the rights of whatever is attached to that. And then you have to set it up so that you can actually close. You can close a real estate. I think you can do a closing in trust, and it doesn't have to be in your name. But you have to do that ahead of time.
This is investment properties, or is this like your own?
Own, period. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
If I understand the latest, so you can literally, at the closing, have the closing and the deed put in the name of a trust.
And that, when you do that, that gives you ownership, or that gives you control, or what is that?
You're control. You still have ownership because, the banks.
Right.
You technically have ownership, but then you definitely have control.
Okay.
Because then the bank has to go through a particular amount of steps in order to go with the deed being in it's very different. So ideally, if you have no debt attached to the property, you'd have it in there for liability issues. In other words, if you do not have a liability policy and you have an event, for instance, you have a steppers event, somebody breaks their leg, they're going to be like the person that threw the party is liable. Okay, what assets does a person have? Wait, don't they have a house? We're going to come after the house. House is in the trust. Can't get to it. is secured. Now you have to go through additional legal steps to do that.
Gotcha.
Without that covering, they can come after all of your personal assets.
And so
Now,
really?
I'll say
Sure.
I'm not an attorney,
Sure.
but that's just general information.
Sure. And so when we get into the idea of business and protecting ourselves and creating businesses, we talk about S-corps and LLCs, and those are protective bodies or entities that provide some level of protection as well. What are your principles or ideas of setting up and getting into running a successful business? We're not going to talk about, obviously, you got to have ideas and all of that. But in terms of just the structure and understanding what it means to the differences between owning and controlling, what's your principles behind setting up a new business and understanding that?
So, primarily with setting up a business, there's various forms you use based upon the goals of what you're trying to accomplish. Obviously, that's LLCs or series LLCs. You may do 501, C3, C4, C2, C5s, those kinds of things. S Corp, obviously, and a C Corp. All of those have various, and sole proprietorship, all of those have various taxable scenarios with them. That's one. Two, the challenges, one of the things with starting a business is understanding, well, at least for me, is you have to master understanding expenses and expenditures.
Okay.
Because what I found in business is revenue is mystical. It's this thing you hope for based upon some input, but there's no guarantee. Expenses are going to be guaranteed if you're in business, because you're going to have those. So what I've learned is how to master the spreadsheet and how to master expenses and not being above the revenue that's coming in, especially if I'm personally having to secure the expenses that are coming in because there's no revenue flowing through to the business. One of the challenges with that is, do I get a partner? Who do I do I go into business with the partner? That can be a challenge because sometimes in partnerships, people have different visions. We both collectively want to make money, but how you make that money can actually destroy the partnership.
Right.
Because of upbringing and all of these other factors that come into place. That's one of the challenges I had in one of the business I started. Business partner wanted to go another way. I wanted to go another way. We decided to part. It was ugly, but not that bad. We were still friends afterwards, but it just kind of separated. Why? Because of running the business wasn't the issue. No. He thought that we should do things this way, and I said we should do things this way. He figured because he was a multimillionaire and he was white, his way worked, and I'm going, but my experience of doing this, I know this way works. Obviously, I turned out to be right and he was wrong, which was proven over a period of time. But setting up a business has a lot of benefits, and particularly as a strategy for tax mitigation. And so those are kind of things when you're saying I need a business, because anytime you are involved in the marketplace in any capacity, I've always been an advocate of having a business for your hobby, to at least have the capacity to have the capacity to do expenses, to offset income. But there's other benefits to that. There's centers set up. One recently, the Polsky Center, which is downtown Hyde Park. It's an incubator for entrepreneurs. When you have a business, you now open up a world of getting advice. You have the Small Business Association, SBA. You have the Small Business Advocacy Council. You can go to these places. They have resources for how do you raise capital, for doing, it's interesting. I come from old school where you had to have a business plan. I found now that, now you do business, people do business with you because they like you. A friend approached me about the Virtue restaurant, and it was just about the guy. I trust the guy and he's a good guy. What's the business plan? I don't know, it's a good guy. Now, back in the old school, you want a full business plan, full marketing plan. You want to do the analysis, projections, etc. But what I found is people want to do business with people they trust and they believe in. And to that end, there's a world of resources available for people that want to be in business. In fact, this country's tax system is generally designed for people that want to be entrepreneurs. One of the reasons why unions become so popular is because of the abuse of workers, because our system, under the sort of industrial model that we have in the U.S., that particular system was more based on widgets. How many employers can we get to produce to get the volume up, to get the margins down, to make get the margins up to make the most money. Now we're in the information technology age. Things have changed a little bit. There's all these resources available for being in business. So the benefit of being an entrepreneur is Mike Gerber has a book that he wrote years ago called The E-Myth. So you have the technician, right? You have the manager, you have the owner. Just because you're a good cook doesn't necessarily mean you need to open up a bakery or catering service. But you need to be able to own the business. So my point is, you can be the cook and you can own the business, but have somebody else running the business, because that's not your skill set, because they're not the same. Just because you're able to produce something doesn't mean that you know how to build the infrastructure around selling it. Different skill set. And so the E-Myth talks about, E is for the entrepreneur myth, is the fact that you think because you're good at something, running a business has a very different psychology. Because the end result has to be profitability, period. So you're not so much as, so I'll give an example. Somebody that is creating something is very adamant about the thing they create. Don't change it. The business person is saying, we need to maybe redesign this because we're not getting the proper margins. Where the creative person is freaking out because it's being changed, the business guy is trying to say we need to make some alterations in order to be able to move. They will come into conflict because the creative person may not necessarily understand how to build a business or build infrastructure around a business. And to build a sales team around a particular product. So the person that does the design may not be the best person to run the company. And we have an example of that of Steve Jobs. Perfect. Steve, so that's why they got Steve Wozniak to do that, right? Because Steve Jobs was good on the design side. The challenge is when you think just because you're a designer you can run a business, it's two different things. Running a business requires a different set of skills, because you have to be able to think almost three-dimensionally. You have to be thinking about revenue, expenses, and oftentimes quality control, or what is the what's the word we use? The supply chain. How do we squeeze out? They used to have, I don't know if they still have a Six Sigma. They used to have.
They still have that. Yeah.
It's been years since, but that system was employed to flush out the inefficiencies in the system for maximum. Am I right?
You're right.
Right. So. That's kind of, and when you're considering business, you can start a business. You can do all of the proper.
And when you say start a business, you're not just talking about the actual paperwork to develop an LLC. You're actually saying have a product, not just an idea.
No.
Okay.
What I mean is starting a business is going through the documentation that is required to start it, because it may be an idea that you need to patent and sell off.
Okay.
And never get to the product. But you need to understand that going in. So starting a business may require you saying, I need to get help on how to do this. I get inboxes a lot, people saying, how do I start an LLC? Go to Cyberdrive, read. But why would I want to do that when I can get the fee for telling them how to do it? You're balancing that kind of thing. But just because you know how to start a business doesn't mean you know how to run a business. because running a business requires a different set of skills. I am not very efficient at running a business. Watch this. I'm efficient at being the person that starts the race and gets us way ahead in the race. But the guy that's going to finish it, I have to find the proper guy that I can pass it off to finish it. Because my sizzle is, I can see the upfront, how to get it going, how to get it in motion, and I can run it for a few years. Who's the next guy that's going to come? Or as I talked to Eric Williams, he calls it the bird system. Says one bird flies a little lower, all of the other birds fly higher, so that the drag coefficient is reduced with the lift, and then the bird in the front eventually goes to the back and we've heard that before. So in that process, that's kind of my deal. This is why I believe in meeting with guys and saying, hey man, I don't have all the answers. You got some answers in some space that I need to lean on you. The question is, how are we going to get over the distrust we have for each other? Because that's the biggest question. Because generally speaking, we have a memory of everybody that's hurt us.
Yep.
The irony is we don't have the same memory of the people that didn't hurt us. We never focus on the people that did not hurt us.
Right.
We only focus on the people that didn't hurt us. And so as a result, we hold everybody else accountable for the distrust of those people. But we don't hold everybody accountable for the people that did not do it.
Right.
And so the question is, at some point, where's the humility? If the end goal is to build empire, where's the humility to get us to the end result? And so it's oftentimes in business, we put a lot of emphasis on people that we've seen, like the Jordans and locally John Rogers, all these guys that have done great things, but they're all pretty much doing the same principles. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's the $100 guy, the 100, all doing the same principles, but it's the mentality of engagement that they have that separates them from everybody else. That's literally the end game it's the mentality.
Okay.
It's the realist. It's the guy that's the realist that comes into the meetings and say, man, that's some bullshit. It's like, dude, it may not be bullshit. You just, in your world it is.
Right.
It's not for you.
Yeah.
You know, so that's sort of a broad how I think critically about business and when I'm trying to challenge people in business, man. You know, right now, my thing, you know, I had the title company. Right. And I still have...
And talk a little bit about the title company, because we're going to get ready to wrap up here in a minute. Okay. So talk a little bit about the title company real quick.
So I was approached back in August. A friend of mine is a business broker, said... we have a holding company, and we are not sure if we should do business with the African American community.
They're not sure? Okay, good.
I get it. I said, why? He says, we don't understand the real estate market if they're buying. I said, nah, they're probably right now one of the leading buyers of real estate. So I don't know particularly what you're talking about. He said, well, would you be interested in taking a look and seeing if we can set up shop in Bronzeville? I said, well, that depends on a couple of factors. I'm not going to do at one point in time in the city of Chicago, can't mention the construction company's name, but what they would do is, in order for the construction company to get the minority contracts, they would hire a minority, put them out as a front person. So it looks as if they had a black ownership, but the person didn't have. And I just said to them, I said, so I am not interested in being the face of nobody's product unless I control 50% or 51%. That way, I have the say-so, at least in part, of kind of how things are structured and done. So if we're going to have that conversation, that's the conversation I'm interested in having. If not, find somebody else. And I say, and one of the guys that's in our circle knows the John Rogers, Jim Reynolds, call him, like, whatever. You know, I don't need it. It's not a necessity.
Right.
I said, but if it is a way that we structure it and I can be of service to the community, then that's a win-win. And I said, and I'll just hold you guys accountable to what you say. And that's kind of how it's been at this point.
And so what's the most powerful thing about having ownership for a title company?
So I found out after doing some research that maybe at one point there was an African American owned title company that went under. So as of today, based upon the paper, I'm the only one in the state.
Okay.
Per my understanding,
okay.
And due diligence. Now, second thing is the state has to approve you. You have to go through an approval process, of which I'm in the middle of now before I come online and they sign off. So they said last week they need an operation agreement for one of my other companies because I have a Series 65.
Which is a financial certification that allows you to do some
investment advisor.
Right.
So it's a securities law license essentially, and a Series 63, which is same kind of thing. So I have to register with FINRA at the state level. So I don't know if because I have some filings in there, stuff. Everything is clean, but the point is that I think for us, I get to affect the entire real estate vertical. I mean, the whole thing. Because we do know that we have contractors, we have general contractors, we have real estate agents, we have real estate brokers, we have painters, we have interior design, we have the whole thing. What we don't have in that mix is a title company. So imagine you literally have a one-stop complete shop of I can go and have a buyer for a raw piece of land, have a company come out and do whatever. We can do commercial, residential, hire one of our people to do the painting of the whole thing. I know the guy Brian Hudson is over NOMA, the organization for the minority architects. They can do the design. We got African American roofers. I can hire a management company to manage it. All of that. In our community, the money stays in our community. And so with the title company, because title companies doing transactions, a lot of title companies are not in the city, but if they are, they're definitely not. Why would a title company reinvest in a community? What would be the purpose and point?
Right.
There is none because it's transactional. You come in, wait for several hours, whatever it is, you close, you're gone.
Right.
My proposition is because I have a certain need for capital, I don't have this much of a need for capital if we hit this number. Why not move this capital back into the community and help build other people?
Right.
One of the things I learned from Jay-Z, it was either Jay-Z or LeBron. I think it was LeBron. Somebody asked him about why did he buy all of his friends' sports cars or something like that. It was either him or Jay-Z, but they talked about the importance of making sure that people around him had some of the similar things he had, because in that way he's sort of he's insulating himself to some degree from some of the challenges that's going to come anyway with people backstabbing or whatever. And so the effective way to build, I'm a huge fan of Godfather, like major fan of Godfather. And I would always tease my boys and be like, man, we should create this thing called the 5 families. Like we have
that can go bad real quick. I just said
that will go bad. But I said, I said what would be cool.
Bad in a good way. But
I was saying this is because we have to figure out the proper way. We have to figure out that trust factor. This is one of the things I try to do, man, in the community is remain a man of faith and a man of integrity. To me, that's the most valuable thing I have. So I could be out here wilding out a whole lot in the city. As much as I love to flirt and shit, I can be just wilding out. I choose not to do that out of a matter of discipline. Because if I'm trying to be respected, then I have to, at the best I can, to represent that. Somebody doesn't like me, that is really not my problem. But if I need to hold true to these virtues that I believe in to be true and just kind of stick with that. And if and that's kind of been my reputation and my name. I'm that stand-up dude that I'm not interested in taking advantage of you, because frankly, you don't have a whole lot of what I need to take advantage of anyway. That's not my gig. It's how can we win? Actually, at the end of the day, I just want to win. And I want everybody around me to win. That's what all of this comes down to. Right. Music, money, let's just win.
Fair enough.
And we can fight later about who gets credit for the win. But right now, let's just win.
Yeah, it's a different type of fight when everybody's winning, though.
Right.
You know? If everybody's winning.
This is my point, man. And we all can win.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's...
The internet took care of that, man. When we remove the concept of geography, we can all win. We just have to get together and figure out how do we source the information we need, and how do we figure this out. Yeah. Somebody's got the information. Yeah. We have to find out who has the information.
Yeah, and that definitely goes back to the level of trust that we have with the people.
It's the trust, man.
Right.
And we can get the information. So that's, you know.
Okay. I mean, we can definitely go on for a whole nother hour, but I'm going to, obviously respect your time. So we're going to wrap up, and I got 2 other questions for you before we go. So I would like for you to finish this sentence. Every father should.
That's a very good question. Every father should set some standards for their son to project themselves on.
Okay.
So their sons can mirror those particular behaviors. That's it.
Okay. And the last question is, give me 3 things that you are currently doing to become a better version of yourself.
One of the things is my health. So I will work out consistently and I stop. That's the first thing. The second thing is reading. I used to read a lot. I fell off last year. I love information, finding information, spending a lot of time alone, trying to process. That's very monastic, I think, kind of part of my life that I sort of choose to do that. So it's basically the health, physical health, the mental health, and starting to be a little bit more accessible to people that kind of say, "Hey, man, I got some ideas. Can you meet?" Because there's a part of you that's dismissive. Yeah. It's like I don't feel like being bothered, because a part of me, I'm very raw about stuff.
Yeah, as we can tell throughout, this conversation will have to be 20 minutes.
And a lot of times, man, it's like I'm not even ready for my own rawness, but it's me trying to fight and get in my space of truth. Yeah. And so it's just trying to make sure that I'm just always being truthful about stuff and not trying to, standing in my truth. And so that's why people that want to hang, like I got basically one best friend, he knows, we hang out, and it gets ugly.
Oh, I'm sure.
But we're trying to fight through these spaces. Yeah. And so we don't, Dave and I started spending time together. He knows, and we have. Yeah. I don't expect nobody to let me off easy. And I'm not going to let you off easy if we connected. And I may not be, the meal for you. That may be somebody else. I'm not that cat, and I'm cool with that. I'm mid-50s right now. I'm on my way to 60 sometime. And so I've lived an amazing life, man. And now I'm in this space of just trying to say, how do I give back? Right. How do I contribute? And how do I replicate information? Yeah. And so those are the 3 things this year I'm really committed to, is just to read into personal health and being disciplined, sticking with things that I've said that I'm doing. And my sons hold me to it. Yeah, especially the little one. Yeah. We were out last night, like I told you, at the bar. Yeah. And I told my son we were going to work out. And I ended up drinking some wine, like 3 glasses of wine. Right. And he texted me about 9:30. I'm thinking he's asleep. Dad, we still gonna work out? I was like,
yeah.
I said, but watch this. I bet when he was texting me that my wife was right there saying, I bet he gonna come home and go to sleep. So it's more like to get back and make her out to be a liar.
Do I have to edit that?
And so I walked in the crib, man, and we went down on the 3rd floor to the gym, and we got it in.
Yeah.
And it's that level.
No, the accountability partner, which I'm getting better at, and I think everybody else should as well. We all have ideas, aspirations, and dreams, and we tell them to our friends, but we don't put ourselves in places where people will hold us accountable for the things that we say out of our mouths. And I think that's important in this stage of my, it should be important in manhood. Like, you need to have somebody that's going to hold you accountable for the things you say good and the things you say bad as well. So I absolutely 100% agree. And so you did mention read. What's the most powerful book that you've read?
Lately, I think the most powerful in context, I'd say the Bible.
Okay.
But the book that I'm really chewing on now is Principles by Ray Dalio. We talked about that.
Which is a really good book.
It's an amazing book.
It takes some time for me because I'm not in the financial space, right?
But it's the
principles can be applied to everything else in life, right?
Yeah. So especially as I'm trying to. So right now I'm still doing some music, but I'm really into the space of creating business in these incubators for musical expression, artistic expression. And so I'm reading a lot of information that people have left on how to do it. I told my son this. I said, everything you need to know to be successful or get anything, somebody has written or the information is out there.
Yep.
The question is, how do you want to utilize the information? Mm-hmm. From the stories of Mr. Johnson, having a white guy go in and buy that building on Michigan Avenue because they wouldn't sell it to him. What resourcefulness it takes to do that. Yeah. So today we have all of those resources.
Right.
We can get into any door we need to get into. We can get, and I always go back to Godfather. I think it was Mike with Hyman Roth saying, we can get to anybody. They were like, you can't kill Hyman Roth or something like that in the airport. Mike says, one thing this is taught me, we can get anybody can get killed.
Yeah, anybody can get
and so we can get, if somebody's goal is, I want to be a millionaire, whatever that means to them, there's a way to get to that, if that's your deal. Mm-hmm. There's a way to get to all of these spaces. There's information on how to do it. The question is, do you have the discipline? And who have you connected with that's gonna say, like, dude, you on some bullshit. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Fair enough. Well, I appreciate the time, and we're pretty much wrapped up.
Thank you. Cool.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Michael Drayton about life, marriage, fatherhood, and business. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this episode. You can find a link in the episode notes. Simply tap or swipe up over the cover art. You will also see other affiliate links pertaining to books or products mentioned in this episode. Please support our show by checking out these links if you're interested. Those clicks will provide our show with a small commission if you decide to purchase. If you like what you're hearing, we would love for you to give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe. I'm your host, Terrell Lindsay, and until next time, be awesome.